on the luxury branding and providing stars, awards, 4 and 5 stars to hotels, restaurants, and spas. And it was fantastic. And in between had IHG, Lowe's, and Hilton. And about a year ago, just almost a year ago now, I went off on my own, took all those years and years of background and built my own organization, just a sole proprietor. And I'm trying to get out there to help, not just in the way that Forbes did, but also my Disney background and some other experiences that I've had. I got to travel extensively with Forbes Travel Guide to half the US, multiple countries, and saw over 80 different brands, from Four Seasons to Ritz-Carlton to one-off boutiques. And then once the pandemic really set in and we knew hospitality was going to be deeply impacted, as well as other organizations, I thought a pivot needed to happen, especially for me, and how I can assist the organizations when they do reopen. So the piece that I'm going to focus on today are what I think are the 4, and there's more, but I think these 4 are definitely the things that you need to really take into account and think through, consider. And what's interesting is, as I've talked to some organizations about this and done some webinars, what I'm about to share, everyone's thinking about, but I don't know if everyone's going as far down the path or down the rabbit hole as we need to in these new mindsets. And we'll touch upon each of these things. The entire series, I've called it Hospitality Anew, because let's be honest, service is going to be new and it's going to evolve and pivot drastically. And it doesn't have to be a hospitality organization. We all provide service in our own way, whether we have customers, clients, patrons, friends, family that we're advising. You really can fit into a lot of different things. So we'll jump in, talk about all 4 of these aspects. Please, I really want in every way possible for this to be very dynamic and 2-way communication. So feel free to unmute, type in the chat, and stop at any time. I want to do my best to not make it one way with you just sitting there listening and me rambling. I'd love to hear your questions and your considerations as we talk about these things. So the first one, and obviously, probably if not the most important, the second most important, is the cleanliness and the safety piece. So there's so many organizations out there now, and maybe you're working with one, or maybe you're about to start working with one, but who I've aligned with is Ecolab. And Ecolab has done a phenomenal job completely taking their already great cleaning process and disinfection philosophies and have drastically adapted it to COVID-19 and coronavirus and the pandemic concerns, and have really stepped it up a notch. So I think the first thing is companies need to think about, who am I going to partner with and who out there has taken it to the next level. Ecolab has worked intimately with Marriott brand. If you're not familiar with Ecolab, Clorox has even done something more than they've done in the past. And there's many more organizations you can think about and who you're going to partner with. My advice is truly that you don't just try to handle it with yourself, because it's one of those moments where we kind of don't know what we don't know, and that's fine. But I think in this new world, at least for a little while, we have to think through those things. So the main points I want to hint on here are the safety and cleanliness aspect has to be much newer than ever before. And while I'll use a lot of hotel and hospitality examples, if someone has a question about their industry that I can try to mimic that instead, please feel free to. But case in point, we've all been to hotels. And when we got to a hotel in the past, we've expected things to be very clean. But we almost expected it. And we didn't always search high and low. Maybe some of us do a little bit more than others. But depending upon the property you're staying at, there's a sense of expectation. And we walk into the room and we believe that it's clean. When we find something like a hair or dust or dirt or someone left food behind, well, we lose our trust. We have to go beyond that now. People have to walk into your place of business, your hotel room, your office, whatever that might be, and see that you have taken new measures. It has to be visual. And yeah, it's very psychological, and There's so much going on now with the debate between wearing masks and not wearing masks. And my opinion is, beyond having to do it for a safety reason, it's a visual sense of comfort that we see people wearing the masks and maybe other items such as gloves or shields, and it gives us a sense of calm. And that really has to be the mindset now, at least for the time being. As guests begin to return, they're going to have a higher sense of expectation. And that higher sense is no different than what we would have when we become the guest instead of the owner or the service provider. So some of the things I would strongly encourage you to think about are a multi-step approach to this new mindset. So first and foremost, you have to learn the guidelines and then be able to teach it or train it to your employees. Whether you have 1 employee or 100 employees, every person needs to get that one-on-one opportunity to the best of our ability. I think there has to be a lot of hands-on. We can't just say it to the team and hope that they heard it and then they'll go back and reproduce it and clean in the way that we need them to. We really have to see them do it and course correct them. We have to make sure that they understand it. If any of you in the room are very L&D oriented and have a strong learning background, you know that auditory learning is the least amount of learners in the world. And for the majority of us, we retain very little. That's why we need visual things such as slides, or we need more hands-on things so we can actually try it out ourselves and see how it feels. I think assessments are going to be crucial, whether it's a written assessment or it is an assessment that you're going to observe and there's a, it actually has purpose. It can't just be an assessment that you say, oh, great job, and give them a fist bump. It has to be a checklist that you said they passed or they failed. It has to have meaning. It really has to be impactful to the team member so that they understand the importance. And here's one of those moments where we all know how significant and important things are now with cleanliness and the post-pandemic world we're living in. But to say it and to do it, or to believe it personally, but then be responsible for it in our job, those are different mindsets. So we really have to be thinking about those things as we begin enforcing these expectations and teaching them to ourselves and our staff. Your standards of cleanliness, you have to determine what performance you want them reaching. I would assume and hope that that's a very high level of performance. These are not things where if they see a little bit of dust, they just brush it with their hand off to the floor. If they realize they missed a portion of cleaning an area, they don't say, oh, I'm too busy to go back and clean it. They have to be thoughtful and really genuine in their approach. I mean, just yesterday, my wife and I went to Disney Springs, and although it prolongs each interaction when we're checking out at the register, everywhere that we went, after one customer or guest walked away, the employee steps out from behind the desk, sprays down the counter, sprays down the ATM machine or the credit card machine, and shows a sense of genuineness. And even though we had to wait another 15 to 20 seconds, we were happy to do so, knowing we were walking up to something that was now sanitized. So we really want to be thinking about those things and having that patience that maybe we all didn't have in the past. I think at the end of the day, we have to ensure the highest levels of protocols within our organizations. So for me, what I'm doing with my series, if you were to have me come and present this to your team or to help you through it, the expectation would be that you have partnered with whomever you feel comfortable with to teach you cleanliness standards, whatever you maybe have to purchase it from Ecolab or from Clorox, for example, and then I would learn that material myself with you prior to my arrival, and then I'd be responsible for teaching that to each and every member of your team, and I would take them through my four steps of training them showing the hands-on competency, giving them some kind of an assessment, and then ensuring that their performance levels are very high. So that to me is the one that we could spend the entire session on the cleanliness piece, but it's one of those things that above all others, we have to take the most serious. I think everybody gets that, but we really have to make sure that we're putting the right mindset into place here. We'll move on. So reboarding is a little phrase that I'm coining or utilizing when it comes down to us returning to our company after having perhaps been closed or furloughed, in addition to us bringing back our staff and reboarding them into our organization. So I think we've all heard of onboarding. Usually that's a new hire, and these are not going to necessarily be new members. They may have been with you for years, but have been away for several weeks. So we have to reboard them. Well, how are we going to go through that? So we have to think about a lot of different things here. And you can see some of the options on the screen. The first one is physical distancing. So for me, I've been a little quirky about calling it social distancing. I don't think we should stop socializing, but we do have to have a physical distance between one another. And if you're truly within hospitality, there has to be socializing. That's the essence of hospitality and customer service. So physical distancing has to happen. And it's the 6-foot guideline, but some companies are doing more. Some organizations are being very, very above and beyond the CDC guidelines and limiting people into their establishment. They're creating less opportunity for people to connect with one another. Some organizations are still doing curbside only, and that's fine. No one will be faulted for doing more, but at the bare minimum, the physical distancing. Well, let's think about that. As I was just giving you those examples, you are probably thinking about yourself as a guest or a customer and how you want to be physically distanced from people and you want to see those guidelines. Well, it's going to be a lot different when you and your employees have to understand those from a safety requirement and the level of comfort. So 2 examples I can give for this one is we've been to a few restaurants since the reopening, and one restaurant we went to was phenomenal about the physical distancing. They were very chipper. They were positive and upbeat. Now on the inside, they may not have been that comfortable, but they were creating that sense of genuine care. They wanted us to feel secure. They wanted us to believe that they had taken the right precautions, and we thought that they did. I think even Disney Springs, going back to them, there's greeters now, and they're very Disney-esque, and they're very supportive of what's going on, but also trying to keep a little bit of the magic. That I think is crucial. The other restaurant we've been to did not go well. You could tell that the employees had not been properly retrained. You could tell that they were not comfortable being back at work. Leadership had not really given them that virtual socially distanced hug and embrace of we're all in this together and let's work through it. And there was just a lack of comfort, and that quickly spilled over into us as the guests. And we were not as excited to dine there and really wanted to get out as quickly as possible. So there has to be retraining. So what I really think we all need to be considerate of is if your business has been closed for, let's say, 10 weeks, and you're anxious to get reopened, obviously, and have revenue coming in again, 1 more week or even 10 more days of maintaining closure to properly reboard your staff is going to be huge. If you just bust open the doors as if nothing really changed and throw some masks on, that's going to be noticeable. And I'm going to guess that some of you that are listening right now have probably experienced a little of that. So really want to be thoughtful about how you're taking the time to reboard. So if you have software or hardware that has been challenging to learn in the first place, maybe it's also changed. Some software companies have actually gone out of business, and you may have to have a new way of supporting your customers and your guests. Well, your team's going to need to either learn that or relearn that. I go back to hotels. The front desk check-in system is very complicated. Also, point of sale systems can be complicated. And if you haven't been using them for 10 or more weeks, you're a little rusty. You're going to need some time to play around with those again before you have individuals in front of you looking for service. I think in terms of service, how are you going to accomplish that now beyond the hardware and the software, the more of the soft skills? So are you going to rethink your service standards? Now, back in the day, front desk agents would come out from behind the desk, shake your hand, hand you a key, take your credit card. They'd hold the card for some time. Cross-contamination, of course, in many ways. Well, those things really can't happen as much anymore, if at all. So how are you going to alter your service standards in how you are going to interact with your customers and your guests? And I think this is, to me, one of the most crucial aspects of as soon as we reopen our doors, we will feel the change and the difference, but it will not take long for us to fall back into old habits. And old habits might not be acceptable. Actually, they'll probably be pretty taboo for the most part now. So if you're putting your hand out to shake it, or another guest's hand, or you're one to place your hand on their shoulder when you seat them, and just that sense of enjoy your meal, those kinds of things can quickly come back to play. We have to break those habits by revising the service standards and the service requirements. And every one of us has them. It doesn't matter if you're Target, Chick-fil-A, real estate, housekeeping, you own your own business. It doesn't matter. We all have service standards. Some of us have them written down. Some of us have them in our minds, but we want to be thinking about how we're going to alter them for the greater good for the time being. I think the last little piece there is of the top 4 bullet points is the culture component. You may have had a very rich and very deep culture, and you still have that, but it's evolved. There's definitely going to be a pivot, and you'll have to be thinking about that new culture that you have to create, not just for you and your employees, but also for your guests. And what will that culture look like and feel like for the next 18 months until we hopefully overcome all this sooner than later and can go back to who we once were. But for the time being, we have to be really thoughtful about that culture aspect and that environment. Even your guests and your customers who've maybe been away, some of your regulars, and they're about to come back, if they come back to your establishment and say to themselves, oh, it's so great to be back, nothing's changed, that's a good opportunity for you to take a step back when they leave and say, well, we have more to do. Your regular guests, your regular customers should be the ones who feel the transition of culture the most. And I don't mean in a negative way. I don't want them to feel change that's scary or not inviting, but that they should see a change in who you are. The last piece, and that's just a little food for thought moment here, is your newest staff members. So we know in hospitality in particular that there could be as much as a 60% changeover of staff. So in other words, 60% of people who used to work in hotels and hospitality may not return, either because they're just not comfortable in the environment anymore, or because of being furloughed for as long as they have, or laid off, they had to find something else. So depending upon what your brand is or what your organization falls into, you may also have a large percentage of staff that may not ever return. That means now you'll be onboarding for the very first time brand new individuals. Have you thought about how you're going to onboard them? Are you going to do distance learning and have them do a meeting like this from home, where they will be learning the culture, the orientation, guidelines, HR expectations over Zoom? Or are you going to have them come in and do one-on-one training, masks on? Are you going to create and partner with organizations that do e-learning and specialize in e-learning and develop that for you? A lot of things to think about there. But at the end of the day, and I've said it a few times already, is there has to be an evolution, and there really has to be a pivot in your training and how you're going to reboard, or in some cases onboard, your staff in the coming weeks. So any questions so far before I move on?
I don't see any questions in the chat yet. So everyone is able to either use the chat feature, or if you want to unmute yourself and ask a question. I will share so that one of the things that we changed, Jason, was actually here in the reboarding. What we looked at as we were bringing people back, right? Initially, the thought was the managers were each going to go to each of our centers because we have 5 centers that are customer facing where staff were going to return to their respective centers. And initially, the managers were going to go as a group, set up each of the centers with the new social distancing guidelines, you know, to lay everything out, put up signs, etc., and then bring staff in and show them, you know, this is the new layout. And so part of what my takeaway was from this was that we really needed to be more specific than just, hey, come look at the new layout, especially because of the fact that we were changing our service model quite significantly in terms of the types of appointments and things that we were doing with customers. It was going to be really no hands-on from our staff and assisting the customers, which is, you know, a total pivot from what we usually do with a customer that comes to our offices for help with resumes and career searches, etc. So we made a significant change from their original plan to what we finally did execute. And then what we did execute was 2 days of training for all staff coming back to the centers. We divided them into team A and B, which was our plan anyway for as we return to work, because we're not all there all at the same time, but each team got 2 days of hands-on training on site on these are the new guidelines, and you know, this is the new service model, and these are the cleaning expectations and all of that. And staff were really appreciative. They were glad we took the time to do that, and I really think it helped them also feel more at ease with our decision to go ahead and open doors when we didn't bring them back, because some people were on the fence. But the best part is that then when we did open the doors, everybody was clear on what the expectations were and were able to execute and perform to the standard that we had set.
And that's great. And I think a good point that you made there is your decision wasn't wrong the first time. You were sending your leaders over, setting up everything perfectly, the signage, the new flow, the changes. It was one of those things where it was let's add to that and think about something else. So, and that's really my goal is everything you're doing has been great. Can I plant a few more seeds or make it think a little differently? And this would be a good idea. So that's awesome. I appreciate that.
This is Juliet. Can you hear me?
Yes, you can. Hi, Julie.
Hi there. I just wanted to share that I work for a large commercial real estate company in Chicago, and our clients basically have, you know, some have made decisions to do reentry, some haven't, but we've actually created software that is like a reentry calculator. So it takes into consideration density and mobility of employees. So it basically recalculates how much square footage you actually need in this new environment, you know?
Wow.
It's really pretty cool software. And of course it's, you know, private for our clients and everything, but so I can't really share, but, but it is really interesting to see because they do need a lot more square footage, but what they're doing is kind of alternating remote employees. You know, so maybe they don't have that much space, but they're just keeping more people home that want to be home. So, or that aren't necessary to be in the office. So anyway, I just thought I'd share, but yeah, we're dealing with this a lot, and we have all different kinds of clients in industrial and government and hospitals and, you know, office, everything. So, but it's really challenging.
Took the time to spend the money on that and create it and put it in place. That's the genuine sense of care that you're showing to the staff.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Exactly.
That's great.
Right.
Thank you for sharing that, Julie.
And, a suggestion I'll give, because obviously we're on this call, we're not all Julie's clients, right? What we did, we hired an industrial engineer, and he came in and helped out, also helped us map out what this new service model could
That's
look
good.
like and what we would have to have staff do. So, that's an idea that folks can take away.
No, that is good.
At each of our centers, it looks a little bit different because each one is laid out differently, and it is, it's got different square footage, et cetera. We have one that is huge and one that is not so huge, and then others that are like on a campus as well, a college campus. So then we've got to take into account other considerations, based on where we're located. And so, again, those are just things that, sometimes, again, you're going to open your door, but maybe you haven't thought out each piece of it. And again, Jason's session really, I was taking notes the whole time and then went back to that team, and it really was helpful.
Yeah, we even have like call centers too. And, you don't think about like, oh, you can't share a phone anymore, so
Right.
You either have to have your Jabber, your soft phones, or your cell phones, and they reimburse. I don't know, it's really complicated, but
It's very complicated.
I like your point about some kind of documentation, giving people something to review, because if you just tell them something, they're not going to grasp it. They have to have some takeaway. And I like also the assessment idea a lot. You have to get feedback, I think, for everyone to be better at this.
Right.
Yeah, so that was great. I'm taking notes too.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Julie.
Yeah, and
Thank you.
assessing them helps you know who can be your, social distance ambassadors, if you will.
Yeah, exactly.
And who are the ones that need a little more TLC as well.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Jason?
Don't be afraid. You can chime in at any time. So we'll head on. I touched upon this briefly in the last one about reboarding. And to me, this is our third biggest element, is the revising of our service and how we're going to provide that to our guests, clients, and customers moving forward. So for me, lots of different aspects, lots of things to think about here. Number one, the new service expectations. One of the things that I've been talking a lot to my particular clients and just some good friends in the industry who are AAA 5 Diamond or Forbes Travel Guide 5-star, we all know that the day that their hotel door opens, they're not going to have the general manager send the staff to find the guidelines and standards and test questions to maintain their stars and diamonds. That's not going to be the priority right now. Maybe at some point in the future, they'll think about those things, but that's not going to be on the forefront of people's minds moving forward. Yes, there will still be a service demand, and there will be an expectation of what kind of service I'm going to receive, but there has to be a newness or a shift in what that looks like. So it has to be understood, and it has to be genuinely adhered to by the staff. And when I say genuinely, we can't have the staff, and we've heard this prior to the pandemic, where staff would say, oh, well, it's not me, it's management. Oh, that's not my policy, that's a corporate expectation. And we always hate hearing those things as patrons and guests, but it's sometimes easy to blame those other organizations or those higher ups for why I have to say no to you, Mr. Guest, or no to you, Mrs. Guest. I think we have to be more genuine in how we provide that level of service now, because we already know it's going to be very different. So again, very particular to hospitality, but I think these things can easily be transitioned to other organizations and concepts. So as people arrive into your place of business, it has to be very sanitized. It has to look fresh and clean in ways we've never seen before. I tease the front desk of hotels a lot that they're just full of clutter. One of the hotels I was supporting in New York was probably going on 20 years old, the building, and the front desk is the only area that hadn't changed. And when I would go behind the desk to spend time with the staff and look down in the drawers and the shelves, it looked 20 years old and 20 years worth of dust and so that cannot happen anymore. Contactless departures. So when someone's done conducting business with you, is it necessary for them to speak to or engage with or have a touch point with a human being? Or can there be a very digitized departure from your business? Hotel aspects, back in the 80s and 90s, there was the television checkout. Well, that went away. No one was doing it anymore. It's always been a function. I've had plenty of guests say to me, can you still check out through the TV? Yes, you certainly can. But nobody does it. They all go to the front desk, they chit chat, they want a copy of their bill. They don't even need to do that anymore. We can email our final bills. So really think about the contactless service wherever possible. I think we've already seen this. Technology has become more crucial than ever. I'm very hopeful that we haven't become too technology dependent. We were already getting to that point, and I think silver lining for me with the pandemic has been home with friends and family, much more so than ever before. So we're getting closer to human requirement, and as we were getting away from it for a while. We need to use technology now to not mandate as much touch point, but there still has to be some kind of voice or knowledge that we're dealing with humans who are considerate and warm and friendly. So you have to kind of balance the technology piece, but make sure you're really utilizing tech in every way possible. In hotels, we have in-room dining. I already know of many properties that division will be completely closed and will never open again anytime soon. There's less people going into your room. We're talking about mini bars going away, buffets going away. I think of Las Vegas hotels where their top profiting revenue of F&B is usually buffets, and those may never be the same again, if even around. So you have to be thinking about, if you do have food and beverage in your division or your company, how are you handling that? If you used to have a coffee station set up in your lobby, how are you going to make that as sensational as possible, or is it time for it to go away? And social distance dining. I think we've all probably been to at least one restaurant since the phase 2 and 3 has been going on in most of our states, where we've been going to restaurants, and you can see that they're very considerate of, one table and there's no one on the other sides of us, and how they're bringing out the food and how they're creating paths in and out of the restaurants to maintain that social distancing. So, a lot of things to think about, and these are just a few. I think to me, one of the most crucial points is this last one, is the staff need to be shown the new ways. So just as Rosa said a moment ago, where they took 2 days to teach their staff the new way, not only was it just safety guidelines and cleanliness guidelines and how we're going to have the flow and how we're going to interact with one another, but it's got to be the service aspect. I mean, the only reason people go in to buy or partake in an industry is they want service in some way, shape, or form. So the staff is going to need to take time. And for me, I am a big advocate of role playing, and usually the staff is not. So you don't have to make it super, corny and uncomfortable, but it can they one-on-one with you share information with the new realm of how we speak to guests, how we interact, how we ask for information, how we support payments and handling of cash if necessary. You can't just say it. You're going to really have to put the staff through the motions of, one, I want you to be a guest and I'm going to be the employee. And as a leader, you should do it wrong. Put your hand out for a handshake and try to touch as much of their stuff as you can. And, don't give it back to them and maintain your safety as well, but show them, make them feel icky, if you will, that that's too much and you touched it and why are you doing it that way? And they need to kind of go through it and experience it on the side of the customer, and then flip it and have them show you that they can then do it properly as the employee. So I think a great deal of time needs to be thought about in your service aspect. It could be a bit lofty of me to say, but it is an opinion of mine that as industries begin to reopen and relaunch, if your service doesn't morph exceptionally, that's going to be what I think puts companies out of business in the next 3 to 6 months. It will not be that the pandemic put me out of business. It will be, I did not morph, evolve, and pivot. I did not change the way I needed to with a number of things, service being the most prominent. And because of that, the word got out and more people stopped coming. So I really, really think that we need to be very thoughtful about how we are instructing ourselves and our staff to provide that exceptional level of service to our guests. The last piece, and we alluded to it again a little earlier with IO and change management, and I'm just kind of calling it leadership pivot. And it's one of those things that as the leaders of our business and our companies, we are going to really have to pivot the biggest. And here's what I mean by that. And I've already seen it again on some cases for the bad. Unfortunately, it has not been for the better. Leaders are coming back or perhaps never were put on furlough depending upon the industry. And they're still coaching, giving feedback, course correcting, or managing their staff on things that really are not important anymore. I mean, so I think a fun one for luxury hotels is you have to use the last name. You're literally not allowed to use the first name of a guest at a 5-star hotel. And in the past, I would hear leaders constantly coaching their staff members on not doing that. Well, I got news for you. No guest is going to care about that. As a matter of fact, after all the weeks of being away from each other, first name will be real nice right about now. And just some of that humanity between all of us and that camaraderie. The moment I see a leader sprint over to pull the employee to the side and chastise them for not using the last name, or any other example that is just not important right now, that's the kind of leadership that is going to then have a mass exodus of staff. And that's going to be, I think, also detrimental to businesses. So the leadership pivot for me is that there has to be a very intense level of emotional intelligence. It's a word that we've all heard. You know, it's been around since the late 70s. It got a little bit bigger into the 80s and 90s, but now it has really become almost second nature to many businesses, EI or EQ, however you wish to phrase it. But emotional intelligence is going to have to be at its highest level for leadership. Whether we're coaching in a positive or in an opportunistic way, whether we're giving feedback or having crucial conversations, I think those things, yes, they're going to need to happen, but I think how we do it, I think how we approach it, I really think titles are out the door right now. Staff are not going to care that you're the director of this, that, and the other. They just want to know that we've all been home and struggling and suffering and maybe having loved ones that are ill or have passed. Different mindsets have to be within our thoughts as leaders right now. I think empowerment and trust, again, these are two concepts that we've all heard since we were newbies in our industries, or maybe even our first jobs. Well, we can't just throw these words into the wind anymore. We have to truly empower our staff, and we have to give them trust like we've never given before. Because the less people interacting with one another, as we know, it's that flattening the curve mindset. So if an employee is dealing with a customer and it's not going well, I need to see your manager. Well, I need to see the manager above that manager, and now send me the GM. Can't be having all these interactions if we don't need to. So the empowerment piece and the trust piece is just going to have to be huge. And that to me is where some of the coaching will come in, to teach the staff that they are genuinely in charge and empowered and have the trust to make good choices and make good decisions. The kind of coaching I would like to hear now is, if the expectation is to spray down the credit card machine in between each guest, and then there's a long line, so the employee says, that guest looked really clean to me, so I'm not going to squirt this time, and I'll squirt it on the next guest and wipe it down. That's where I would think you'll need to have some coaching with them. But it can't be that chastising, I'm above you, you're below me, what's wrong with you? It has to be thoughtful. It has to be warm. It has to, maybe the leader just goes over and you squirt the cleaner and you clean it down and say, I saw you missed that last guest. Remember every guest? I mean, it's got to be those kinds of things, because we are, it's not just a hashtag. We are all in this together. So we have to be much more thoughtful about that. I think the engagement piece, again, we've all seen leaders who are horribly unengaged and they're sitting in their office nonstop and have that open door policy, which they really don't. That engagement is going to have to be transitioned. So where I talked earlier about us having the right mindset and not falling into old habits, I think leaders are going to have the most difficult time if they're not given the proper tools, resources, and support from the highest level of leadership. These line level leaders are going to have to transition, because it will not take much more than a few days for them to go right back to the manager or the leader they were prior to all of this. And that's going to be, I think, detrimental. You're going to have guests that are frustrated. You're going to have employees that are going to be upset. And now is the time where employees will not be scared to quit. I think now is the time when employees will say, I have no problem leaving, because in a few weeks, everyone's going to be hiring. So we have to be really putting that virtual hug around all of our staff in ways we've never done before. And this is something that will have to be taught to leaders, that genuine sense of emotional intelligence and that genuine sense of support and engagement. Some leaders are great at it and it just comes very natural. And some managers struggle to be good leaders. So we might have to be really thoughtful about those transitions at this time as well. I mean, a good colleague, or past colleague of mine, was a fantastic manager of processes and things, but never did well really with the leading and the empathy that came along with it. And they've actually taken a demotion in their company because they know that they're going to struggle properly reconnecting with their employees. So stay with your job and make bad choices and get let go, or make a good decision to quote unquote be demoted or take a step back and keep your job. I think those are the kinds of things that have to be really put into the minds of every one of us right now. Easier said than done, but it's where we are right now. And just to kind of bring it all together, and with a smaller group and less questions, we might only go the hour, maybe just a little bit over. But the four things, once again, that I thought are part of the hospitality anew, and that newness of reopening, is that cleanliness and safety above, in my mind, the most important. Then reboarding all of our staff, including ourselves. We have to revise the service, no matter if we have one service guideline or 500 service guidelines. They all have to be looked at very closely prior to opening your doors again to your guests and customers. And then last but not least is the leadership pivot, in that all of our mindsets really, really have to transition into this current state. I'm trying desperately not to call it the new world, but the temporary realm, if you will. It's our current reality, not our new normal. And that's, I'm holding on to that because I really, truly believe it. So with that, again, I know it's a bit of a smaller group, and I genuinely thank you all for taking some time out of your day to listen and participate. I toss it back on to everyone in the room to ask comments, anything that they would like, and I'm happy to try to answer them.
I'm with you too on that last statement, Jason. I don't want to call this the new normal. It's just the current state that we're in. So any questions for Jason on the other half of what he presented, or just in general overall? You know, I was continuing to take, more notes, and I wrote down contactless departures, even though, what we're doing in our service model is more, face-to-face with someone. But I'm wondering how, maybe we could look at not having to give them anything, or the things that we do give them, how we can do that in a way that is less contact with them. And I also made a note about the old habits, because someone mentioned to me the other day that we need to do a COVID retraining. And that's because they're seeing folks that are not abiding by all of the guidelines we've placed. So definitely something, folks should keep their eye on is are folks stepping back into their old ways of doing things.
I don't bite, I promise. You can ask questions. A few people are typing great comments. Thank you so much.
Yeah, but it looks like folks are stepping away also. Jason, I think this was awesome. Thank you. I got so many takeaways again. I hope that this was really, great for the folks that did attend. Jason shared his details here. You can also go to our website, and we have his contact information there also. And if you're a member, we will be sharing this on our website in the members section, and probably in a couple of days, about 24 to 48 hours, and our team will have it there for you to access the recording. So thank you very much to everyone. Jason, thank you so much for your time today, and for the very insightful details that you presented to us in really a very concise way. Kept it pretty simple with those 4 areas. So thank you for that.
Certainly, it was a pleasure. I love being here. For those of you that haven't left yet, it's JOR Hospitality Solutions. I have no idea what I spelled out the first time, so please forgive me. And I do hope to hear from any of you, whether it's on email or via my website. And lots of luck. Stay safe, stay well, and good luck with reopening.
Good luck, everyone. Take care. Thank you, Jason.